Welcome to the presentation sponsored by Proud on why isn't my home worth more and promoting fair housing appraisals. Our speaker tonight is Rosalind Williams. To give you a little background about Rosalind, she has a master's in urban planning from the University of Washington, has spent over 40 years in urban planning. From 2006 to 2013, she was the Director of Planning and Development here in Ferguson, responsible for things like long-range planning, historic preservation, community and economic development, zoning, what we call the FNIP program here, Ferguson Neighborhood Improvement Program, and also Live Well Ferguson, which I'll mention a little bit later because my involvement with that with you was great.
That was it.
She held similar positions with Kirkwood and Berkeley here in St. Louis County and also in Ithaca, New York. She played a major role in the development of the downtown form-based zoning code, which we currently have in Ferguson, the downtown strategic development plan, and Live Well Ferguson was an effort back during Rosalind's tenure with in conjunction with TrailNet, and also Rosalind got a $300,000 grant from the Missouri Foundation for Health to develop the Live Well Ferguson effort. And a lot of things sprung out of that. One of them is still ongoing. The Ferguson Twilight Run that we've had every year for 15 years now came out of the Live Well Ferguson effort, and that's still an ongoing tremendous plus for our community. Rosalind now works with the With Action group, and yeah, it mentions it in some of the slides. And she's going to be a panelist at the upcoming conference that we're planning called 30 Years After Oak Park, Ferguson, Then and Now, which is Friday and Saturday, October 18th and 19th at the Flow Valley College. We may have a special guest on our Zoom conference here. Athena Williams, the Executive Director of the Oak Park Regional Housing Center, was planning on joining. I don't know if she's joined yet or not.
She's here.
She is there. Hi, Athena. Oh, how are you?
Hello,
doing?
everyone. Thanks for the invite.
Okay, great. Great. Glad you could join us. So after Rosalind's presentation, we'll have questions and answers. So jot down any questions you have, and then I guess you'll handle them at the end. Okay, it's all yours, Rosalind. Thank you for coming.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to speak to you. This is kind of a prelude to the conference in October.
Yep.
And I'm not planning necessarily to speak just to the Oak Park experience or whatever. I want to talk about Black neighborhoods and disinvestment and possible solutions. So I'm supposed to think I'm covering my I'm supposed to hit the slide.
Can you do a sound check with the?
Ask everybody if they can hear. Okay, people online, we just want to know real quick, can you hear Rosalind?
I can hear clearly. Yes.
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 Okay.
Good. Okay, I found the slide. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait, one.
Oop, I think I went
One,
too
two,
far.
yeah.
Here we go. I am the president and co-founder of With Action. And With Action's been around for about 6 years. And it really is the result of meeting a real estate agent at an event that has nothing to do with housing. But we started talking, and before you know it, we were starting to have weekly coffees to talk about our common experiences. And that person was Barbara Heiss, who is a real estate agent, and she's always has sold a number of houses in North County. even though she sells houses in other places, primarily related to the Oak Park Exchange approach to things. New City was being blockbusted, and they set up a system so that instead of trying to keep white residents in the third ward, which is north of Olive, they actually brought in new white homeowners to buy the houses in New City. So I actually went to an Exchange Congress event in Oak Park when I was first working for Ferguson. And it was a strange kind of encounter, because they were talking about integration maintenance, and I'm going, I don't know if I can trust integration maintenance, but I found that it was probably the thing to do in the 70s, at the time that there was a lot of demographic change in Oak Park. And Oak Park really, the Exchange Congress, which was a number of suburbs around the country, when they came here, when Ferguson joined and New City joined, it was like 20 years almost too late to actually do something. So Barbara and I founded With Action in order to try to promote inclusive neighborhoods, and we're talking about all sectors, economic, social, and culturally inclusive neighborhoods, as well as trying to halt the concentration of poverty. Now, I bring that up because in segregated communities, which most of North County is segregated now, you have very weak markets, and I'll get into exactly what happens in weak markets when it comes to looking at national policy, which only promotes poverty concentration. Okay, so this is primarily what our vision is, and we hope to be able to help neighborhoods and communities create and maintain inclusive neighborhoods, and maintaining is another part of what we're trying to do, which includes the assurance program that was used by Oak Park. I just want to give you a little background, because I'm just recently finding out that the neighborhood I grew up in was an anomaly. And it was an anomaly because it was the first, as they say, fine subdivision for African Americans in Baton Rouge, East Baton Rouge Parish. And I guess I didn't realize that wasn't the case all over the country, that Black people had subdivisions in which they lived, and it was built probably in most of it in the 50s. That picture is a picture of my subdivision. It's not a picture of my house, but that was the only one I could find of the subdivision. But that's typical of the subdivision I grew up in. It was mostly ranch style houses, and some of them were actually designed by architects and built. And the subdivision is right across the highway from Southern University, which is an historically Black college. almost everybody who lived in Southern Heights worked at Southern University, which made it a very safe and unrisky situation. But to have a new subdivision that's 100% Black in Louisiana, which was officially segregated, versus in the north where you have kind of manipulated segregation, was well, it was possible. And the ingredients for that, which I want you to remember when we get to the end, is that there was full employment and everybody would live there. There were 2 household incomes, which was unusual in the 50s, but not for Black families. That's mostly how they're reported. And there was a bank that said that they would provide all the mortgages. Now, that's very unusual in the South or anywhere else. But they would provide all the mortgages for the houses that are being built. And it was unusual because the banks were, according to other kinds of programs, were supposed to consider Black communities high risk. And obviously, this bank didn't figure it as high risk. Actually, the bank was owned by the man who sold the property in the subdivision. So that was a nice situation. I don't want to bore you because, excuse me. Right. But I'm sure you're well aware of the history of redlining. When it comes to, okay, when it comes, I feel like lightened.
Just some more water.
Yeah, drink some more water. We have more. We can fill you up again.
Okay. But if you look at that chart, between the 1940s and 60s is when Southern Heights subdivision I lived in was built. That was the same time as the homeowners loan corporation that created I'm sorry, that created the redlining maps. And if you can see that, that's St. Louis City and County. And and the redlining, the red areas are where the real estate agencies and financial institutions felt it was too risky to loan, and there was no money that went from the financial institutions to those areas, except in Louisiana, in my neighborhood, which is unusual. The impact of redlining came about, well, redlining came about because President Wilson decided to segregate the federal government. And I don't know if people are aware of that, but I found out that about 5 years ago only. And the interesting thing is that before President Wilson segregated the federal government, there were a lot of communities that were integrated already. there were a lot of places where Black people and white people lived close together. Actually, the subdivision I grew up in, the next streets over to the south of our subdivision were all white residents who were more working class residents. But at that time, the appraisal system, which wasn't much of an industry at the time, kind of grew up with the redlining program. And it required explicitly, if I can read that, it required explicitly that race and ethnicity is a way for lenders to restrict access to capital in those red areas. And it required that they report exactly whether that neighborhood is high risk or not. In the 60s, though, you have the fair housing legislation, and reportedly it was supposed to stop redlining, but nothing really changed. And appraisals are still, they can't mention race or ethnicity or income, but they're still actually operating under the same rules as they had before, sans the racial definition. I have to move this thing out of the way. Okay. And so here's the Fannie Mae guidelines for neighborhood analysis that the appraisers are using. And they're supposed to use this because Fannie Mae is a secondary market, and if the banks want to sell their mortgage, they have to go by Fannie Mae's regulations. I find that Fannie Mae's regulations are the culprit and the linchpin for everything that follows an appraisal when you're selling or buying a house. It says that the factors that affect the value and the marketability of properties in the neighborhood, these can be addressed by such things as proximity of the property to employment, amenities, employment stability, appeal to the market, changes in land use, access to public transportation, adverse environmental influences. Now, when you think of an more urban Black community, redlining has affected every one of those characteristics that they're supposed to report. And of course, made them worse, so that fait accompli, you have a high-risk neighborhood. The other thing that Fannie Mae tells their appraisers is that they have to stay within the same neighborhood, use recent sales as comparables for the property that's being evaluated. And we have to consider the typical buyer. Now, what in the world does that mean? Does that mean that if you have a Black neighborhood, you have to stay within that neighborhood even though there aren't any recent sales, and the properties have been devalued every time their appraisal has been administered? And so therefore, only Black people can move in. That's the typical buyer. And so that's that guideline is what we are trying to change. It is the linchpin for everything that follows, and all of the ills and discrepancies and disparities in Black neighborhoods. You won't believe it, but it's true.
I believe it. I believe
You believe it, yes.
it. We see the movie.
Okay. As a matter of fact, I have a kind of a slide that says, these are all of the impacts. You have the appraisals, and these are all of the issues that come up. We need appraisal reform, need new initiatives, all of the community impact, including education, and all of those issues are the direct result of an appraisal by Fannie Mae in Black communities. There are other things that influence what happens in the Black community. Right after the Fair Housing Law was passed, that was under Johnson, President Johnson. Nixon followed, and his Secretary of HUD was George Romney, as the father of Romney, who ran for president. Okay. His goal and vision was open communities, which really means that he was trying to integrate the suburbs, the white suburbs. Nixon had a problem with that because he was running for, trying to become a president, and he was afraid that the suburban voters would not vote for him because they instituted that. That's not what they wanted. So Romney was kind of sidelined, and Nixon changed the focus to include individual discrimination and low-income housing. Now, I'm not quite sure what that has to do with fair housing, but the fair housing movement was supposed to be a movement aimed to open up the exclusionary white communities to non-residents. Nixon made it so that there was no attention to desegregation, and it all focused on Black communities, and HUD's focus or job was to work to provide low-income housing. And I remember, I'm old enough to remember when that happened. I was working in Ithaca, and I took on a neighborhood in this college town that was had a Black population in it, and we wanted to use federal funds. Well, there was categorical funds that could be used to build new housing or rehab housing and whatever. And Nixon got rid of that because that would be used to actually integrate the suburbs. And he changed it to the Community Development Block Grants, which means that he just dispersed all of the money so that it could be totally useless. In other words, you had every community getting, that had any low-income population, getting funds from Community Development Block Grant. And it did not allow any new construction. So that's just, you have to watch who you vote in as president, because they have a lot of power. And one of the things that we have to remember is that affordable housing, which we are obsessed with right now, is not fair in housing. And the original purpose of the Fair Housing Law was to further fair housing, and that meant actually allowing Black people to live where they wanted. Okay. oh goodness, I'm gonna have to step it up here.
You're doing fine. We're
Yeah,
fine.
we're good.
We're fine on time.
Okay. This map, comes from, the county, St. Louis County. And it shows the emphasis on different programs that originated from Romney's administration, or Nixon managed to get. And if you notice, all of those little dots in color and whatever, except for a few that are in the South County, and those were original African American or white areas.
That's true.
Okay. All of the programs are right back into the Black neighborhood. In other words, nobody's going anywhere. We're dealing with affordable housing, we're building new construction with low-income housing tax credits, and we are providing vouchers and all kinds of things. The provision is that it can only be used in low-income areas. And what it does in St. Louis, especially in other areas like St. Louis and Detroit and Cleveland and whatever, when you have segregation, you have weak markets. And when you have weak markets, you have low demand. And so you are, you're just kind of recycling people from one area to the other without allowing them to escape, actually. And so that's why we were emphasizing the disruption of concentrated poverty, because that's all it's doing is getting poor people into new housing that they rent, that after 15 years are supposed to be able to purchase. But no one is doing anything like providing jobs, or some kind of other income. And also improving the environment and those kinds of things. So that's what you end up with Nixon. You end up with the same condition you had before. And this brings up my point, all of the red and wheat markets. And Ferguson's right in the middle somewhere. Middle markets, those are their actually richer folks anyway, and they're stable communities. And then actually strong markets are high demand. You can do all kinds of things when you have a strong market because you have demand for housing, and you can actually upgrade a neighborhood because you have the resources and people who want to buy. I thought this chart was interesting. It comes from a professor who's now at WashU, and I can never remember her name, so I can't remember. But anyway, I think it points out exactly what's happening. The orange is decreasing Black population, and the blue is increasing Black population. And the values are going up in the orange when it's decreasing Black population, and going down or staying steady in increasing Black populations. I think Ferguson probably experienced a lot of that. But it's a very, it really does kind of just tell the whole story. I wanted to ask the question from the other side. What's the benefit to the white housing market to have segregation and to have devaluation of this investment. And of all people, I asked AI. It's pretty smart, actually. And it's, it says what the market gets out of it, other than the Black communities and minority communities, is that the value, property values are protected and enhanced, and they provide the non-risk market. And there's a supply and demand, which I was talking about before. And then there's the economic segmentation, where you have defined communities, and within that market, you can kind of demarcate the very rich from the middle income and whatever, but you have different markets that are active. And then redlining and helps to keep all of those things actually working, because of supply and demand. If you don't have houses that are for sale or in good condition to sell, then the houses in the other part of the community that happens to be mostly white are more valuable. So you reduce the demand by under-investing and adding demand to the white communities. And I asked, of all people, an attorney at the National Fair Housing Alliance in Washington. I just came back from the conference, and I said, I think we want to change the provisions for appraisers to stay within the neighborhoods that they're selling in, because it just kind of perpetuates value loss. And she said, well, you don't want to do that because the whole market is based on that. And she said, it's a matter of, remember, location, location, location. And I go, oh God, and she's in the fair housing thing. And so that was a waste of time. I'm not going to go through all of the impacts of the disparities, because I think everybody kind of realizes what's happening here and there, and when I need to make up some time. But the conditions for devaluing homes are more than just the real estate market. Although, and it's myths about living in Black neighborhoods, that it's not good for your property values. And I think my neighborhood kind of counteracts that premise. It's also, but in St. Louis, we have the Delmar Divide and the Olive Divide. In New City, it's Olive that makes up the difference. And when Barbara and I did an analysis of values over a certain period of time, south of Delmar was going up, middle between Delmar and Olive was going up a little bit and recovering from the recession, and north of Olive was going down. And so that's the, so you don't have to have an appraiser who actually knows the neighborhoods. All they have to do is find out that they're going north of Denver, no, Raleigh, to make a difference, to, you know, to evaluate the property. As a matter of fact, a number of them come from areas where they don't know the market at all, and are afraid to even enter a Black neighborhood, and they're making a judgment about the value of the property. As I pointed out before, underinvestment is systematically codified in the underwriting project. And I want to make a point about that. A lot of well-meaning people, because of Nixon's change in focus, have decided that we need more home ownership and people have to be trained to be homeowners and all of that. But it's really just blaming the victim. You know, the victim is the one who should say, you know, this is where, you know, the white community should be educated about what they are doing and how they are taking advantage, and, you know, they have the privilege, while the Black community is the one that suffers from devaluation. And I think that's the misapplied policies is national. At the conference that I went to, which was supposed to be Fair Housing Conference, I couldn't get anybody to understand what I was talking about, trying to change the appraisal system. They all, they had panels and they all were talking about how they increased home ownership here and how the whatever. But no one's changing the system. So it's all working around the system. And I even asked a woman from Fannie Mae who was on a panel. And I said, when is Fannie Mae going to change their guidelines for appraisals? And the moderator for that panel whispered to the woman from Fannie Mae and said, "You want me to take that?" She said, "No, I can take it. I can handle it." I think I embarrassed her, but she said, "Well, we're doing this kind of program, and we're going to do that kind of program, but nobody's touching the systemic thing that creates all of these problems." And so in my 40 plus, which is actually about 50 years of working in this profession and coming from the neighborhood I came from and becoming a planner, I thought all those 40 years I was actually doing something. I concentrated on improving the quality of life, primarily in Black communities. I did zoning and all those other things, but that was my focus. I redeveloped Mitchell Park. And one of the considerations in doing the redevelopment of Mitchell Park was that it was a tight housing market, and Mitchell Park was a part of the school system. And Mitchell Park was 97% low income, which is quite a task. But my goal for the neighborhood was to economically integrate that neighborhood. And with high demand, you can do that. But you first have to take care of the people who are in the neighborhood, even though they're low income, and their houses, so that you can increase the value of those houses first, and then bring in new housing for higher income people. So but one of the lessons I learned is that when I came from Kirkwood to Ferguson, I couldn't do any of that here in Ferguson because of the weak market, the low demand. I mean, when I was planning development director, I would get calls from people who had inherited property, houses, and they wanted to donate it to the city. And I go, no, we don't need houses, but that was the condition in which people were not willing to invest back into the city, and were leaving, the Ferguson. But one of the things that I learned from living in Southern Heights is that it doesn't really matter whether you live in a nice neighborhood if you have all of these other requirements and attitudes about Black communities. You're caught in a vortex, I would say, of disinvestment all around you. And that neighborhood, which I'm finding out because my sister went back and living in the house, that neighborhood, after the fair housing laws, is declining. There's 20% vacancy in that neighborhood. The amenities and services around that neighborhood there were a few Black-owned businesses. But now my sister has to go 5 miles to get to a grocery store. You have houses around that neighborhood that have never really been upgraded, attitude or whatever, because those neighborhoods were occupied by poor Black people, except for the white neighborhood right next door, and those people were all gone and replaced by Black people. And so you're really not escaping anything, and the wealth that I could have gotten from the property of my parents is gone. It is the real estate, online real estate people say it's worth one thing, but I know that in property taxes or whatever, in their appraisal, it's worth half that. But if you don't have any sales, you don't know where you are. I mean, you just, if you're not in the real estate market, then you have no idea what the world's going on, and I think that's what happens to people. And when I learned, of course, that's conservative governments, I was always fearful because I did community development, block grant administration, even in Ithaca, and I was always fearful when Republicans got in because they were going to do something that made it even more difficult to actually improve neighborhoods. And I think I talked about blaming the victim. And I guess the big thing is that I now know, because I collaborated with a real estate agent who taught me a lot that I didn't know after, the 40 or 50 years of trying to do something. And I buttonholed an appraiser in the parking lot who spoke at a Slaco conference, and I said, I need an appraiser. And I told him what we were trying to do, and he said, oh, I got the solution. So he's also part of Myth Action. And his name is Doug Potts, who actually studied to be a pianist, concert pianist. So maybe there's something, some kind of synergistic relationship between the arts and being open-minded about change. And so these are the kinds of things that kind of led us up to considering what we call restorative appraisal. And let me see, I think I need to change. But before I get to that, one of the stories that Barbara tells about selling houses north of Delmar is this story of a woman who bought a house in the West End. She got a loan to improve her house, interior, make improvements. And then 3 years later, she decided to sell it. There was a buyer who was Black and an architect who said, okay, I'll buy it for what you're asking. And they brought in the appraiser, and the appraiser said, if you were 200,000, now it's worth 190. In most cases, which is what happens, is that people who are buying houses don't necessarily have that $10,000 that they can add to their to pay for the mortgage. I guess the mortgage is only a paid for a portion of it. In other words, they have to come up with $10,000. Okay. If they can't come up with $10,000, then what happens is that you don't get a mortgage. You can't sell it. You can't get a mortgage. When you can't get a mortgage, you have to lower the price. And you lower the price, you're in a situation where you've lost all your equity. And if you are totally underwater without even worrying about trying to sell it, you get foreclosed on. And then if you get foreclosed on, it goes to the bank. And the bank doesn't sell it to a low-income person who might buy it. It goes almost directly to the investors. And the investors are the ones who are infiltrating Black communities and reducing the number of houses that are available for anybody and charging rents as though these houses were worth twice as much as the appraiser says they were. And it's a vicious cycle. So if you go back to that appraisal, that's where it starts. And what we wanted to do is, and in this case, between the West End and Stephen of Oliver, if you know the geography of the area, West End is north of Delmar, and Stephen of Oliver was south. There used to be, a long time ago, one neighborhood. One's predominantly Black, the other one predominantly white. The housing market below Delmar is strong. The one above where this house was trying to be sold was weak. And so if you look at those houses, I don't know if you can tell the difference between those neighborhoods. And actually, when the appraiser appraised the house in the West End, they was to stay within the neighborhood of the West End, and that she couldn't find any recent sales, so she went to University City, which is a totally different jurisdiction, and she went to the lowest income neighborhood in New City, which is right at Skinker and Olive. And that was supposed to be the comparable for one of these houses. Well, in Skinker to Bolivar, there was a comp and a recent sale that she ignored when Barbara tried to get the bank president to reconsider the appraisal. He said, no, I'm not going past Delmar, I'm not going south of Delmar. And that's the attitude and the long time practice of the banks in St. Louis. Okay. Well, we're calling our innovation. We're supposed to change the appraisal system, the appraisal guidelines for Fannie Mae. We're calling it Florida appraisals. Now, Doug, who is the appraiser guy, but he's not a residential appraiser. He's the one who thought of this system, which would use, and actually those two pictures would be great example. Would you, when you're appraising a house in a Black community that's for sale for a mortgage, you go to a healthy white neighborhood and use the comparables from there as the way to evaluate the value. Now, you don't have to necessarily have the value come in at the comp in the white neighborhood. You just have to allow whoever wants to buy the house for $200,000 to buy the different house. And that would open up wealth to people who are selling and avoid all of these ramifications of not being able to get that appraisal. And so that's what we're trying to do. It is, something's going to be a national policy and fight because we're threatening the system. But it has to be done if anything is going to ever improve. And so we think that we need a proof of concept, maybe in Ferguson, maybe in West End, to demonstrate that if you have a neighborhood that's actually investing and you have all of these programs, and funds to help upgrade the market, upgrade the housing, you can attract investors and use appraisals from outside of that neighborhood. But you can attract investors if you have an assurance program, which is what you had at the time. And it was used primarily to keep people from leaving in Ferguson. And the recession kind of messed that up. I had to tell people, I'm sorry, you can't claim, a loss because we have a national recession rather than a local one. And you had 40 households that actually had that insurance program. But my idea is to wed the appraisal reform with the assurance program in a test neighborhood to show that if you can assure people that they're not going to lose their investment, then you can attract them back. And you especially need higher income people to move back because you already have too many low income people. And also you need to work on bringing in investment from public and private, but it would also work for the banks because then they will feel like they are not taking any risk. And we just have to convince Fannie Mae that this is the appropriate and the best thing to do in the future so that you can have growth in Black communities and you can stabilize them by assurance programs that are kind of almost a substitute for the restorative appraisal, at least for a short period of time. In that the banks and people who are looking, as well as people who already live in the neighborhood, know that that the values are not going to go down, and that they can take the risk, they can add a room, they can, buy another house. People don't live there or used to live there can come back and feel like that they're safe and the values will not decline. So that, I think. Okay. And of course, you know about the assurance program from Mark. Kind of,
I do, but I don't think a
a lot of people, okay.
because that was a long time ago.
Yeah, well, there are 3 types of assurance programs that, what they were trying to do is keep people from moving, white flight kind of thing, and they wanted to keep people in the neighborhood and they guaranteed that they would not lose value if they stayed.
Was that like a 5-year?
5 years, I think it was for the different ones. Well, that was Oak Parks. They were the first. They're right next to Chicago, they're the first suburbs from the city of Chicago. And they not only had an assurance program, but they had counseling with people who were renters. And they counseled them to go to a predominantly, if it was a Black person, to rent in a predominantly white area, kind of thing. And so they tried to mix it up so that they were kind of managing integration, so you wouldn't get concentrations. They also are still providing that counseling and that, what do they call it, positive steering. Then you had the west, northwest and southwest neighborhoods in Chicago. And that's a different kind of equity assurance. They went to the state legislature and got a provision to create those kinds of districts, which are a number of neighborhoods. And they tax the residents annually in those neighborhoods to do the same kind of thing. Neither the southwest or the northwest equity assurance districts had to pay out anybody because if you have some people who are actually participating, other people figure, well, they'll keep it, there's assurance there. I mean, they have faith that the values are not going to go down. So they didn't have to have everybody participate, but the program worked. And it was also universal in there. They just paid their fees and that has happened. Those programs have been around for 20 years, and they're now using all that money that they've collected over the years to rehab houses in the neighborhoods, which is a good use. They use that. And then there was Syracuse. Syracuse is, in northern part of New York State. Syracuse was losing value relative to the suburbs of Syracuse. And they wanted to assure people that if you fixed up your house and whatever, that you won't lose that value. There was a Nobel Prize winning economist who came up with this whole thing. I forgot his name. Anyway, and he made it an index of the whole city. So is depending on how the rest of the city is doing, you either can say that you're losing value or gaining value. And so those are the 3 types. And then of course Ferguson and University City was in the Oak Park type of assurance. Oh, see, I thought I was gonna take forever. And so from here, we'd like to, with action, would like to have proof of concept neighborhood so that we can actually get change. And these are the kind of the criteria for that proof of concept neighborhood. And it has to be, the activities should be kind of comprehensive as far as trying to get the neighborhood inclusive and revitalized. But it has to be a contained area. It can't be all of Ferguson. When I came here, I found that that was one of the issues with, when you have very little money, you don't spread it all over the place. Otherwise, you can't get any impact or any externalities from all of the effort that you make. And not the FNP, I guess it was the FNP program, which reverted to subsidizing the interest rate at United Missouri Bank. It went to anybody and everybody, and so it had no effect on any particular area of the city. So that's what we're trying to do, and I'm hoping that we can dismantle redlining and change the guidelines nationally, equitably evaluate homes in Black communities, integrate communities to foster social mobility. And I think that that's one of the things that I will bring back to my neighborhood, because we had it was middle class, but we had a school, and that was Southern University Laboratory School, which was we were the guinea pigs for all of the teachers that came out of the university. But it was a pretty good school. And so we got a good education, and very few of the sons and daughters of the original owners of those houses returned to that neighborhood. They went away. And so when things started changing, it was like not disastrous immediately, but my sister who lives there now says, I know nobody in the neighborhood. And stabilize all the neighborhoods. And so we believe that over time, we could create neighborhoods that are black and white, minority and majority neighborhoods all over an area, if we can start now. It's ambitious, but we gotta start somewhere. We gotta shoot for the stars. And so that's the end of that. And I don't know if you have questions.
To Ferguson, so I don't know Ferguson examples of this, but I know the city of St. Louis pretty well.
Yes.
Riverview in North St. Louis
Uh-huh.
and Hampton in South St. Louis. You can change those neighborhoods. The housing is exactly the same.
Yes.
Street block size is the same. Everything about it is the same, except the people who live in the houses.
Right.
Is anybody in St. Louis working on this? St. Louis looks like a perfect laboratory for
Well,
this.
actually, the best St. Louis, we went through kind of an exercise of pairing up neighborhoods, just like you were saying.
Yeah, they're all over the place.
Yes, and looking at houses versus neighborhoods, and trying to find neighborhoods, housing stock that is identical or very close. And so that you have to ignore the current conditions, because those can change. And when they talk about location, they're really talking about, well, if I lived on the beach, that would be quite a different than if I lived in downtown St. Louis, you know, that kind of thing. That's location, not whether,
West End and Tower Grove Park are the exact same houses,
yeah.
exact same.
Hi.
I guess piggybacking in terms of concept and, I mean, straight out of the city. I know that you're familiar with the West End, but that's what I mentioned. But, my question is, do you see that kind of program that you spoke about, which I will have to help myself keep up with, find out more information about? It seems like that's the kind of program that would be beneficial in the West End. Because as T was saying, when you move from actually across the street, across the other, right, you have houses that look just like the one between Page and the other.
Yeah.
And I was curious about when I met you, because there's a brand new house that I keep choose to pay, but really making people know about the property at 5920 June. 5920 June, beautiful house. And it's a historical building too. The owner of the concrete block company made concrete block homes, which to me seem to be predecessors of homes that were well insulated and energy efficient. They were energy efficient homes at that turn of the century. They were built in 1950. The area changed racially, and a young man renovated the house. Beautiful. But what he's saying is he's not able to get the money he's asking for, even though the bank came and gave an analysis. He's pretty close to, right? And he wants dollars for the house, based upon a lot of things and him fixing it up. But he has not been able to sell that house. Now, we didn't expect anybody in the neighborhood to try to buy a house for $400,000. And I've seen that house, because I live next door to it, go through several sales. And I believe the last sale to whoever the previous owners was $300,000. And so if he's asking us for an upgraded situation, changed the floor plans and made a little bit open concept. The bedrooms are very nice, and turned it into a multi-bedroom house with multi-bathrooms now, full baths. And updated, it's very modern looking on the inside, so I don't understand. And I haven't understand, I can talk to you later, can't briefly explain what happened. Because it sounds like what you're talking about did not happen over in that area. And I know that there's a division, I don't know if you knew about it, but there's a division between the communities that are halfway between, going from Page to halfway the distance between Page and Delmar. And we have brand new houses over here, modern houses. And what I don't understand is how can we get fairness in terms of the value of homes? Because because it seems like people are riding around, and I don't know how they get your phone numbers or your, text.
They're calling everybody
Mm.
in North County. I think they're calling from California and New York.
I don't know what to call
So
it,
it's,
but it
Isn't
seems like they want, to get those houses for little or nothing. And even in the condition that many of them are in, and it's a historic, we have the largest number of concrete block houses in the United States, the largest concentrated area. And so we like where we live, and we want to stay there. It's a wonderful, location. But the question becomes, how can we, what option do we have? And it sounds like what you're talking about is one of those options. And to make a long story short, is it?
Yes. Yes, the problem is that everybody is told all kinds of myths about north of Delmar. And so the pool of buyers is really small. And so you need not only a good appraisal, but you need some buyers. And you have to be able to kind of reverse that risk analysis so that people will take the risk.
And do you, since you know the situation, you know all of it, do you think that it is possible to do that at this time or start to do that in the Central West End area, especially between Union, bounded by Union, Delmar, Pinker, and Page?
Well,
Because Washington U is down the street, they don't seem to have a problem.
if I can get Washington University to actually put money aside for an assurance program, who knows, might be
They're the ones buying up all the property.
Yeah, they're destroyed.
yeah.
Are there any questions?
Yes, we do have a question online.
Okay.
Michelle, you want to unmute and ask your question? Michelle?
I'm here. I apologize. I'm here. My question was, good evening, an excellent presentation. I wanted to ask a question about unincorporated county areas. Are they often redlined for properties since they're not connected with any municipality?
The real estate system is really not directly connected with government. And so they don't really care that much about boundaries except for how it affects the house or the value. And so they're probably getting the same treatment as any incorporated area on the real estate industry.
Wow. And I asked because there was a different assessment for our property value a year ago than when it was reassessed. And so that's the reason it went up actually, but it had been low for a minute, and that's the reason I asked. So thank you for answering that for me.
Well, there is something interesting is that people complain about taxes going up. And Barbara and I were listening, I don't know, to some report that said, oh, property values are going up in North County. And we said, what? And so we called the appraisal, tax appraisers. And we said, what do you mean values are going up? Well, we have all of these investors coming in, and we assume that the government is making them improve their houses. And so therefore, we're appraising them at that level.
Oh, my gosh.
And you go, oh, wow. There is there's a data group that does an analysis of taxes for, for a municipality or metropolitan area. And they have come up with a kind of a chart that goes like, let me see if I can, well, high on one end, and that's the low cost value house, way up, high taxes. And then you go all the way down and you kind of hit that curve. And these are the rich folks who are not paying much. And they also show that when the values go up, or even if they have a sale or anything, in a low income area, they change the values for all of the houses. But they don't do that for the rich folks.
Wow.
And so therefore, they're paying the richer, more affluent areas, they're paying for the taxes that have been appraised a while back and have no relationship to the value at which they can sell their houses. So they have this windfall and have not been paying the amount of taxes they should have. And so, it's totally inequitable system again. Yes,
So,
Hello.
yeah,
Hey, how are you? I'm Dr. Elisa Vaughn. Can everybody hear me?
yes.
yes,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay. So I am a mortgage lender for Midwest Bank Center. And this call was just so refreshing to me. So I was born and raised in East St. Louis, Illinois, in an urban area, one of the most high-rated crime areas in the world. And I see all the redlining. And so what I have been doing lately, and I want to share this with everybody, I don't care if it's Missouri, Illinois, Texas, wherever. What I have been doing personally is trying to bridge the gap between the values. And I have been educating our urban people. I teach a class for free on Thursday nights on financial literacy and why we should become homeowners, even in the urban areas, how we can create our own comparables. So I am a part of the Jackie Joyner Kersey new division that's going up with the new $300,000 homes that we don't want to buy because we are so afraid of the pricing. But I'm trying to teach people that this is how wealth gets started, with appraisals, with the putting the suburban homes in the urban area. We have to get ourselves positioned to do so. And so what I do is teach financial literacy. I teach us how to save our money, how to invest in the urban areas instead of letting all the investors come in, just like you just said, and steal our properties. We got to keep it within. I teach us how to keep our credit good, how to keep the debt to income low. If anybody wants me to come speak at one of their events, I do it for free, so that I can keep the home ownership within the urban community so that we don't have all these rundown houses. What we can fix up the rundown houses with, little money. It really doesn't take much but effort and knowledge. The knowledge of the economic planning comes from one of us, you know what I'm saying, that kind of know more and getting in front of people and teaching. So I really didn't have any questions. I just wanted to put that out there that I'm doing that personally, aside from my own personal salary, just so that I can build up my own community where I'm from. I'm tired of seeing the rundown houses. I'm tired of seeing the burned down houses. I want us to be able to buy whatever we want to buy, and it doesn't have to be much. I'm financing a $39,000 house right now, and the person only makes $800 a month. It's doable with knowledge, it's very doable with knowledge. So I just wanted to put that out there. If anybody want my information, it's not a marketing thing for me, it's a care thing for me. I really love the urban communities. I want to see us grow. I want to teach us about appraisals because I look at appraisals all day long too, and how we can create our own comparables.
Alyssa, just a quick question for Alyssa. Are so is that the bank where Mr. Kimbrough is?
Yeah, he's the CEO. Yes.
Okay. Page in Ferguson, are you at Page in Ferguson?
Mm-hmm. I'm all over, so
Okay.
I'm mobile, so I can go wherever.
Yeah, it just sounded like some things that he's been trying to do.
Right.
So,
And you know what? They came and found me for this job position, because we needed somebody. Again, I'm African American. I'm from the urban community. I can relate to the language, the way that we live, the way that we were raised, the way that we've changed, education or not, either way. And that's why they found me. And it's just a blessing to be in this position to be able to assist us. I don't care where we are, St. Louis, Missouri, Illinois, wherever we are. I am there to help the communities. If anybody want my help, I am there.
okay, well, thank you
Thank
much.
you, yeah. And we have another question, Deborah Grady online.
Can we get some?
Oh, okay.
Can we,
Okay, Deborah, hold on a minute.
Go
Let me
ahead.
get one from
but
the
you
floor.
introduced her,
Oh,
so go ahead.
okay. Cassandra says, go ahead, Deborah.
On me. Okay. I don't know if it's a question or a comment. I guess it's a combination. Listening to the presentation, I guess the question part of it is to devalue Black communities. Was that a strategic move on the part of our government to segregate people into certain areas? In other words, I'm saying whoever's in this process, they picked certain areas to target?
Yes, there's kind of there's a relationship between government and the real estate agents. And the real estate industry has lots of influence, excuse me, on the government. And that's how it started. It was really the realtors who, I'm not sure if it's the realtors, but the real estate agents in the 30s who created this system. And just looking again. And so it's hard to separate the government at this time from the real estate people.
Well, and the banks played a role in this too, I'm assuming, based on what was said about the person's asking X amount of dollars, and they say, well, no, you can only, it's only worth this. And then the buyer's like, well, they either come up with the money or they can't buy the house. And it becomes like a cycle as houses begin to devalue, because maybe the seller will say, okay, I'll take that because I want to sell.
Right, exactly.
And I would add on to that, from that, it's, for instance, that you've been talking about comparable houses in different neighborhoods. They start off the same, and then with the redlining, this house being in this neighborhood gets to get new roof, get a loan from the bank to get the new roof, or they get to update their kitchen when it gets a little out of date and add, keep the value up, where the person in the red line district can't get loans to update or keep basic repairs possibly on the house. So they're like, where do you live? And no, we don't see your house increasing with value while you're maintaining it. So no, we're not giving you the funds you need to keep
Well, and
your
then what happens too?
property repaired. And so they do start. This house does end up staying better, and this house starts declining because you can't get the loan. One can get the loan and the other one can't. But even related to that, well, no, it's not even related to that. So I'm changing questions, talking about the investors coming into community and changing the demand for properties, et cetera, and increasing rents and making the house unaffordable for local people, things like that. Have you heard of programs that governments like municipalities are implementing to stave off the issues that come with outside investors? Have you found some popular?
Yeah, there are communities that actually are buying out the investors. At least they're trying to, and they're trying to put, to some degree, those houses into community trusts so that you can have the community owning the property in aggregate, while you own the individual house on top of the land.
So that sounds like beyond housing.
I'm sorry, I
yeah.
couldn't understand. Couldn't understand what you said.
The question?
No, it sounds like what?
Sounds like
Yeah.
beyond housing.
Oh.
Beyond housing
Okay.
does,
Yeah.
they've bought a lot of houses, particularly in Berkeley, and I'm aware of, but some other communities. And they rehab the house and they rent it with option to purchase, but you don't purchase the land, you just purchase the house.
Yeah.
And they keep the rights to the land, which is really strange to me. Are you aware of that, Colin?
No, I
You
don't know that one.
haven't heard of that? Yeah, I'm not
It's an
quite sure.
attempt, it's an attempt for the community to control who buys to some degree, who, to stay off the investors. But the investors are really stealing all of the equity from the neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so this way you try to keep it within the neighborhood and, and control the land and how it's being used.
There's a very,
I have,
very, government program that is abetting the investors, and that is Section 8, where there is reimbursement at set levels, and every investor landlord makes a purchase based on Section 8 guaranteed income.
Right.
And the house next door with the homeowner living in it is now living next, well, Berkeley's a great example because it's happening like crazy in this post-war suburban Berkeley area
Right.
with deteriorated houses where they can get $1,500 a month rent. And in a house that could never justify $1,500 a month.
Right.
And that's Section 8 that's causing it.
well, I wanted to make a comment along, well, it's related to it. In our community, we have neighborhood organizations, but we don't have a kind that owns the property in the community. And one of the things that I've seen is the government does contribute to the problem that we have in valuing property, because if you look at the Central West End, there have been some new buildings around the area where the Whole Foods store is. And what they do is, because I couldn't figure out how they could have gotten money, low income money, but this is how they do it. The investor can pay for a building, or build a building, but they have to commit a certain amount of apartment to Section 8 or low income. So therefore, theoretically, you have a mixed income level going on. However, it doesn't work that way when you do it in the Black community. And one of the things that we had, we in West End Neighbors, and I think just a collection of individual neighborhood organizations, like the one that I'm in from Julie. We were told, because they weren't doing it at first, they were told when someone wanted to build. And they had to get, the other thing in that, I think that the community has to some kind of way have input in that kind of building. Well, we didn't want it because the investor came in and wanted a school. And, all of a sudden, we talked to him on, what do you call it, Zoom. And he didn't show up for the meeting. But he sent a representative or something to say that they really felt like they had a really good plan because they wanted the school to be divided up into studio apartments for low-income people and all of that, and the neighborhood just blew up and said, no, no, hell no. We want real people who have real jobs, who can sustain properties, who want to be in the neighborhood, be a part of the neighborhood. We do not want to be and I'm going to say the word, dumping ground for one economical class only. And that is what they have done in the city of St. Louis, based upon my observation for decades and decades and decades after Brown versus the Board of Education. So, and then in turn, someone had spoken earlier about, well, does the government have a hand in it? Government had a hand in it a long time ago when they were doing the urban renewal situation.
Right.
As a matter of fact, prior to that, the government said that the developers could not even sell to African Americans, period, who were going out. This was at the time when Overland was being developed and all of that. They were never, that was not including Black Americans.
That sounds like, yeah, that community benefit programs, agreements come with some of the tax, when somebody asks for tax credits, sometimes they agree to community benefit programs.
They're individually negotiated, so corrupt.
Right. You have a question? There's a question on
There,
the.
no, our person had to leave.
Okay.
At
Oh, our
3 minutes
person
to leave.
left?
She wanted to share something, but she
Okay, hold
definitely
on.
wants to see the recording.
Oh, she wanted to share something, so she's gone. So
She
she
had
didn't
to-
say
she
what
had
she
another
wanted to
call.
share.
No, she had
Okay.
another call.
And I got a
Okay.
question too.
And Jerry has a question.
I just wanted to
Oh, but
know,
after you.
how does Section 8 play into it? It seems to me like north of, 70 is heavily Section 8. So why is that?
Well, it's because,
And is that a totally different topic? If it
it's
is-
because you can't put it any place but in low-income areas. And
Oh.
so, and also that landlords don't accept Section 8 any place outside of.
It's against the law to discriminate on income source.
Yeah,
At least in St. Louis it is. It's against the law. You can be prosecuted for it.
yeah, we had to add
But I
that,
think
What happened to that blackjack
they don't
case?
know.
yeah. When I
Because
was,
there's a law. I mean,
when I was working in Ithaca and dealing with community development funds, if we had a low-income area, well, students could be low-income as well, but if we had a low-income area